So
Precisely.
before we enter higher education, because I know obviously both of you, on a different note, both of you were very involved and instrumental in Fees Must Fall. If my memory serves me well, at WITS, at UP as well, Afrikaans Must Fall. So before we perhaps enter the discussion document aspect of the higher education, which is our last point for the day, tell us about your experiences. I mean, as a young student activist, I think our viewers would be interested. The struggles that you would have gone through, protesting. You've been arrested, I assume. Talk to us.
Handcuffs. No, let me tell you the story because it's actually so hilarious, right? So there was an interdict, I think, at the time, and protesting because it was during the time of Afrikaans Must Fall.
Oh, okay.
Right, so now if you look at the history of Afrikaans Must Fall at the University of Pretoria, and I think the reason why they targeted me and other comrades was because it happened when I was contesting for presidency in the SRC. So it was in our manifesto that when we come into power, we're getting rid of Afrikaans, right? And starting afresh, right? So that didn't happen because they rigged elections and all of that. I we know UP.
Hey, they rig UP.
They always rig.
Last year we won at UP. We came out. They came with some stories. They're trying something this year.
I promise you. Every year when the EFF has not been in government, you must know that they rigged. That is just the status quo at the University of Pretoria. So then the following year we did Insourcing Now. And then after that, shortly after that was Afrikaans Must Fall, right? And at the time, Insourcing Now, I think I was still pregnant. And then Afrikaans Must Fall, I wasn't there either because I had just given birth. I'm not sure of the details, right? But I wasn't there. Well, now we're thinking the things we do. Ma police I feel like 4 a.m. Now and then when I come out, that man says, "Are we here to fetch you?"
So he doesn't even believe, like,
because it's like, we were told that this, we were told that we're fetching a very dangerous person. And he's like, no, my sister, you can't even brush your teeth. And then there's like 10 GTI cars outside. That guy was so shocked. And then he says to me, out, right? But when we got to the station, there was another one who said to me, no, the reason why we didn't fetch you on Friday is because one of my brothers actually works at the University of Pretoria. He's a security guard there. And you guys just insourced him a month ago. So when they gave us your names, we were like, no, so balanda Monday extend. You know, because
obviously if they fetch you on Friday,
then it means we're not selling weekend day.
Appearing on Monday.
It's like, no, Steno is Monday, so they can come inside and go straight to court, right? But then there were some of our comrades who spent much longer periods of time in jail. Urasi was one of them. Amla was one of them. Because the university really criminalized us. And I think that is what we also need to start awakening people to the fact that that is how the system responds. Very soon we'll be hearing that President Sihlolonzi did 1, 2, 3. Just to criminalize you and to tarnish your name. It's not a new thing. It's a modus operandi of the system. They did it to Nelson Mandela. They're doing it to the commander-in-chief. They are doing it to us. That's how they operate. To bring disintegrity to your name so that society sees you as a criminal and not an activist and not a revolutionary, right? So that is what happened. And then I think with the University of Pretoria, with the activism, we were very creative. I mean, we were artists. We had Black Thursdays where we'd go to the student center. Because I'm sure University of Pretoria, and then when they would see red t-shirts, they would just send SMSs that school is suspended for the rest of the day. In the early days, they wouldn't want to see 5 of us gathered together. They would send these private security personnel to follow us even into the classrooms.
Sure.
To see what contributions we're making in classrooms. And remember, when we're talking about UP, we're talking about a university that is central to the make of Afrikanerdom. Right? The intellectual make of Afrikanerdom and societal make of Afrikanerdom. It is UP that conceptualizes ideologies like the Volksmoederdom, Volksmoeder phenomenon, where women are put into the social sciences and then men into the sciences like with chemistries and all of that, right? That is the baby of the University of Pretoria. It took white patriarchy and made it into an ideology that can be absorbed by society that still links us to this day. You go to the clinic, who are the nurses? Abo mama, who are the teachers? Abo mama, who are the social workers? Abo mama. And then you go into the police stations. Abo bana mapoisa, amadota, abo bana ma doctor, amadota. You see, that's the baby of the University of Pretoria in the make of society. So that's where we come from. And then in that era, University of Pretoria had a policy that says they only accept 40% of black people.
Sure.
That's where we come from. In the residences in the university. And my city, 40% of black people, we count Indians, we count coloreds, we count international students.
I'm sure Nama China they are there.
Everybody who's not white was added in that 40%. And then Bonapatana is 60%.
Sure.
And it was reflected everywhere, even with the leadership structures in residences. That's how, what you're speaking to about maintaining cliques is actually it runs so deep, because you look at the surnames of the people that are leading these residences, you see, but it's the same surnames that keep recurring. It keeps being Van Staden. It keeps being the same people that lead even the res culture and implement it, because now we meet, we do socials and all of that. What do? You do Soki. You do everything that is Afrikaans culture, right? So that is the space that the University of, and I think with many other Afrikaner-dominated universities like Stellenbosch, we share a lot of similarities in how we interact with higher education. So UP does not give you a chance but to resist. You just have to find your tribe. And luckily for us at the time, it was not long after the EFF was formed. It just automated to us just coming together and fighting the system. And some of the things we won and some we are still fighting, but we are still very much committed. I think the babies are doing a very beautiful work.
They are fighting.
How UP? They are fighting.
KK, you were at Wits. And I mean, I imagine the experiences wouldn't be too different to UP. But tell us about your experience as a student, activist, and leader during the times of Fees Must Fall, before we get to the discussion document on higher education.
It's actually quite an interesting journey. I'm recruited into the EFF through a mechanism that comrades that were leading at the time had sort of come up with. They created a platform called Black Dot Symposia. And they would have these interesting topics every Friday, where black students would mostly gather of all different parties. And we digest, seminal texts, critical race theory, we do Fanon, we do Biko, we do Patricia Phil Collins, and it was a platform that sort of attracted a lot of people to the EFF. And I mentioned this because I think Fees Must Fall is not possible outside of the EFF.
Yes, absolutely.
And when you study history, like when you study, political science and sociology, you'll understand that it's not a coincidence that the EFF forms the Students' Command in 2015. And in the following year, there's a uprising, and the two most important turning points in the history of South Africa were led by students, were led by student movements. That were inspired by the ideology of black consciousness. And I think even the year before the EFF Students' Command is formed, you have branches that are in the universities that are already doing the work. Like outsourcing must fall started before, the EFF Students' Command. And I think I remember in 2014 when Vuyani was contesting to be SRC president, he makes a very important speech, and he says, I think it's important to locate ourselves because we're in Africa, but our surroundings do not reflect that, He was referring to the fact that at Wits, there's buildings that are named after Oppenheimer.